Hello, I'm Porter Anderson. I'm editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspectives, and I'm very happy to have you with us. We are the news medium of the international book publishing industry. We're delighted to have you join us and the Sheikh Zayed Book Award for what we know is going to be a truly interesting discussion. Our title today is Representations of Arabic Voices and Topics in Academic Publishing. And what we're looking at is how Arabic voices, which should be integral to the global academic conversation, are handling what sometimes is a challenging environment for their ability to get across, to be included. What's working, what isn't, and what's the way forward? We're joined today by three terrific speakers. I'm so glad to have every one of you with us. Dr. Nikolaus Hasse is a professor of philosophy at the University of Würzburg and the 2018 winner of the Sheikh Zayed Book Award in its Arab Culture and Other Languages category. The Zayed jury honored his book called Success and Suppression, Arabic Sciences and Philosophy in the Renaissance. It's from Harvard University Press, 2016. I heartily recommend it to you. And then also with us is Tarek El Aris, the professor and chair of Middle Eastern Studies at Dartmouth University here in the United States. One of his most recent books is Leaks, Hacks, and Scandals, Arab Culture in the Digital Age, which is something I want to read. I haven't gotten to it yet. Princeton University Press. That's a 2018 release. And finally, we're joined by Abdurraouf Oueslati, who is the acquisitions editor in Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies with the scholarly press Brill Publishing, with which I'm sure you're familiar. Enormous amount of work coming out of the company. This event, I want to let you know, is offered in English and in Arabic. Our terrific interpreter, Tarek, is waiting to let you know what we're saying if you need it in a second language. So click the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom window to choose your language. And we hope that this will work for you. We think that this is an important thing to offer so that we're all comfortable in how we're hearing the conversation today. If you have a question for us along the way, you can drop it into the Q&A area, and we hope to have time to respond to some of what may be asked by our audience members. After this event is over, we will upload the English and the Arabic versions to the YouTube channel for the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. And in case you'd like to rewatch anything or share the video with your network, that will be the place to find the entire tape on both sides of the linguistic side here, and to let your friends and your colleagues know what was said and so that they can watch it themselves. This event, as I've mentioned, is hosted not only by us at Publishing Perspectives, but also the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. And it's one of the programs that's being organized in celebration of the United Arab Emirates National Month of Reading, something I wish we had in the United States. It aims to help build a society grounded in science and knowledge, contributing to the country's position as a center of content and culture. Fantastic effort. The Sheikh Zayed Book Award will be revealing the shortlists for the 15th edition of the award in the coming weeks. And I hope you'll watch for that. You can read us at Publishing Perspectives 5 days a week, free of charge. We'll have the news as soon as it comes. So watch for it, please. So getting into our conversation here. Again, we are titled Representations of Arabic Voices and Topics in Academic Publishing. To get us started, I am going to just run over the 4 initial questions we presented to our 3 specialists. And then we'll ask each of them to give us a few minutes of their thoughts, their main talking points that come in response to our questions. We'll then continue our conversation together. And near the end of the hour, we hope, as I was mentioning, to be able to check on questions that might be coming in from you. So here are the 4 initial questions that we set out to our colleagues here to see what they would say back, and you're about to hear their comments in response. First, how can publishers ensure that Arabic scholars and subjects are represented in their catalogs? Second, beyond acquisitions, what other measures can publishers take to support scholars working with the Arabic language and in Arabic studies? Third, how can smaller academic publishers working in the specialized areas, such as Arabic studies, make sure their content is seen more globally, particularly when the larger publishers are using their resources to shift to open access? And lastly, how did English become the dominant language of scholarly publishing, and how can we broaden scholarly publication to include Arabic and other languages. So this is just the beginning of where we've started in our conversation, which I should tell you has been going on in our exchanges for a couple of weeks now. This is how I know that what's coming is going to be quite interesting to you. I'm going to turn first to Professor Hasse, to Dag, please, if possible. Dag, can you give us your top of mind thoughts in response to this line of questioning?
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation, Porter. I'm glad to join you here. I think the question is very relevant. I think you're very, very right in saying that Arabic voices are underrepresented in publishing in general, in the humanities and in science. And yeah, the question is how to change this. I'm pragmatic about the language question, I have to say from the start. I'm German speaking originally, and if I was Russian, it would be the same, or Dutch or Swedish. If you want to reach a bigger audience, it doesn't make much sense to publish in Swedish or in Dutch or in Russian or in Arabic, and or in German for that matter. So I think we need to be pragmatic here and work on our English as young scholars especially, and improve our English as a language for scholarship, and try to get these things being translated. But that also means for the publishing companies, it would be very sensible to survey Arabic journals and Arabic monograph series and encourage very good scholars to publish their work in English with them, or in French. And yeah, that takes, I mean, for this, that takes time, of course, and it's difficult. But perhaps there can be channels to do this, or cooperations. One idea I had when Porter was sending his questions was perhaps it would be good to have something like a best paper award for a paper in Arabic in journals, financed by a foundation or by publishing companies themselves, as one way to finance English translations of very good articles that have already been published in Arabic in journals, and then publish them in English with their company, to give them a different audience. Yeah, because it was one of the experiences with the Sheikh Zayed Book Award that you reach a completely different audience with an award.
Yes.
If it's then in Arabic speaking countries, even with a book in English. So the same would be the other way around with Arabic scholarly works that would be translated into English. And well, I could imagine that you have set up a journal that publishes good papers, say in the social sciences or in history, from Arabic journals. Of course, you don't want to, I mean, you need a filter, obviously. If you have encouraged spontaneous submission of articles, you would be flooded, I guess. So perhaps as a publisher, you could have a cooperation with a specific journal and say, well, we will ensure that your best articles in Arabic would be published with us, something like this, and translate, and we finance the translation and have the quality control. Let's see whether I can share the screen for a moment. Yeah, can you see this? That's a very good article. My Field in Medieval History, Journal of Medieval and Islamic History, Ain Shams, Egypt. And you see here some of the articles are in French or in English, but some are in Arabic. And this is one example of such a journal, where you could have a cooperation. Well, one other issue I don't want to talk too long at the beginning, but one other issue is what small companies could do in the changing sphere of publishing. And I think it doesn't make much sense to have another monograph series on Middle Eastern studies or something like this, because you don't get enough visibility with this. But to concentrate on hot issues, on contentious issues, say Andalusia, whether or Central Asian Islamic heritage, or Islam in Russia, or something like this. You see, there are enough issues around that could be a topic of Iranian or Arab or whatever, or Turkish themes, but there are enough around that also in history are important for the discussion today. And of course, I'm always in teaching, I'm always looking out for material for teaching. So that's another possibility to, I'm always on the look for bilingual editions of classics like Arabic and English, because if I use them, I encourage those pupils and students who don't know Arabic to learn Arabic if they really get the hook of it. So yeah, that's a possibility to also, because teaching material usually sells pretty well if we get to know it. You always buy it for the library, the university library. Yeah, I think these are the points I want to make right now, but I can make some points later in the discussion.
Sure. No, these are very good. I'd like to follow up with one thing you're saying in terms of cooperation.
Yeah.
In the trade, there is a very fine children's publishing company called Kalimat in the UAE, as a matter of fact, and they have set up reciprocal agreements with companies in the United Kingdom, for example, like Bloomsbury, one of the very biggest of the major independent houses there. And their agreement is that they will trade 10 books during a certain period of time, 1, 2, 3 years. And that in England, what Bloomsbury will do is have the 10 Arabic books coming in from Kalimat translated into English and sell them through its channels. And in the UAE, the Kalimat group will take those 10 books coming from Bloomsbury, have them translated into Arabic and sell them into the Arab world. To me, this sounds like a very sensible arrangement. Do you know of academic companies arrangements like this at this point? Are there Middle Eastern houses that are so powerful in putting out wonderful material that could arrange with English language houses or even French language houses, those of larger academic languages, to make such a trade available? Is that happening very often?
But I think Abdurraouf would know better, but I'm not aware. But the Sheikh Zayed Book Award people certainly know too, because they have their own translation program too, which is very, very good. Yeah, this sounds like a very good idea. One thing also to look out for is, I think, not only what is published right now, but also in history, in Arabic or Persian or Turkish, the like history books, historians' works, or in other fields of social sciences of the 20th century, because it's like classics that are read in the Arab world or the Islamic world, but are not really known in Western languages. And then to add this perspective to the very dominant perspective of Western concepts of history, that's, I mean, that doesn't answer your question, but because we're speaking of these 10 books, books that are published now are important, but there's also, I think, a big potential for translating of classics of the 20th century in Middle Eastern languages, in modern into English.
I think you're very right. I mean, these are our strong material, classic material that's being lost to the wider world, unless it's handled in the kind of way you're talking about. It may be, in fact, that such a reciprocal arrangement could focus on exactly that kind of material to bring
True.
it forward and make sure that it's getting across before we focus so much on contemporary work. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right. You're also right about the translation program that's so wonderful with the Sheikh Zayed award. One of the things I love that they did just very recently, I think it's within the last couple of months, I had this story. They have made their own site available in 5 more languages.
Yeah.
So when you go to the Sheikh Zayed site, you've got this marvelous list of languages that you can use to look at everything. This is great. I mean, this is the kind of leadership
Mhm.
that I think in cross-language understanding that I think we need to see. So you're quite right. Thank you for these points, Doug. This is a great start here. And I wonder, Tarek, may we turn to you next, please?
Sure.
Talk to us a little bit about from your position with Dartmouth and everything you're doing. Where do you see this whole set of issues standing right now in terms of how the Arabic world and its scholarship is being received or not by the rest of the world?
Yeah. I'm trained in comparative literature, so
Mhm.
by my training is always to see interdisciplinarity, connection, and how to frame book proposals, how to present books, how to market books as not only claiming expertise in only one field, but also how to make them relevant as part of a larger conversation about religion, literature, anthropology, philosophy, and what have you. So this is very important. And there needs to be a balance between the zoom in and the zoom out, between the kind of very specific expertise that scholars have and develop, but also in the kind of conversations that they could or not always be aware of. And this is also has to do with the nature of the fields and disciplinary formations. Sometimes people are in Near Eastern Studies department or are doing the same work in a language department and so on. So there needs to be both, I think, editors, but also professors and other people in the field need to kind of recognize these connections. And I think so that books are not seen as only like dealing with niche subjects that end up kind of appealing to a very, very specific audience, and also that has also monetary repercussions because the book ends up costing a lot of money. No one is able to afford the $200 you have books, or even more than that sometimes
Yeah,
from some
yeah.
presses. Abdurraouf, I'm not saying anything about Brill, okay? but what I'm saying is that there needs to be a collaboration between authors and editors and among editors themselves to see how to take a project and also try to connect it to larger conversations in the fields that are not just simply Arabic history or modern Arabic literature or so how do we create these cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary links where we cross-list books, at the intersection of different fields. And so the question here, the books are not just simply within area studies or within kind of Orientalist studies in a very strict sense, but that could also have relevance to debates that are happening in philosophy, literature, and in other languages and cultures. So I think editors need to work together. And there is a way also of, when they request or they accept proposals from authors, there could be some questions that would help authors see or recognize certain connections that they were not even aware of. So I think there has to be a balance of kind of connecting what's happening in Arabic Islamic studies to other fields. So we enter as Arabic studies into a larger conversation and as part of the humanities and the social sciences. Um, the other issue I see here is the question also of marketing these books, and I think it's important. These books are not gonna. I don't think you're gonna have a lot of bestsellers in academic. I mean, you might. Hopefully, you will. But there needs to be some subvention. I mean, if you look at Europe, you look at French, you look at. I mean, governments work to provide subventions, major subventions for research, and that takes different shapes and forms. Even in the US, you have that if you apply for grants and so on and so forth. So I think that also has to happen, at the level of publication. Like the book is not going to, maybe make money, but how do we creatively find ways to subsidize publications and also subsidize communication departments that deal with marketing these books, taking out ads in major publications, or now using social media, or contacting certain reviewers that are able to make the argument for that book. Like, how is this specific book that deals with a very kind of specialized topic can be relevant to conversations happening today, to other fields, and so on. So there has to be, I think, a communication marketing department that is properly subsidized, that is, strategically thinking of making those connections that provides the book and also the field with more exposure. And to come back to Doug's point, I think awards are very, very important. And there is really a paucity of awards. I mean, Sheikh Zayed, of course, you have, but let's say in Middle Eastern Studies, in the association, you have like awards you can count on the fingers of one hand. And that is really a major, major problem, because awards don't only recognize good scholarship expressed in one book or an article, but it also raises the profile of a field. And that's what I think we are talking about ultimately. How do we raise the profile of Arabic studies, or Islamic studies, or Middle Eastern studies? And we need more awards. And this is where the role of foundations has to come in. And as Doug was saying, like, how do you intervene? Either to create translation awards, to work with, professional association, to fund awards. I mean, there is very, very little awards in our field, and that's a problem. And I think that people need to do something about this and push this more. And on the question of language, which, I just want to mention a couple of journals. I want to mention Al-Abhath at the American University of Beirut and Alif at the American University of Cairo, that publish articles in Arabic, English, sometimes even in French, which is great. And there is, there is a synergy. There is like something that works there, and I think we can think about it. But I want to come back. I want to quote also from a bilingual edition, Gibran, on the future of Arabic language, because I want to quote something about, your question about whether Arabic can be the language of scholarship. So this is in response to a survey by Al Hilal journal 1920, so about the future of Arabic language. So Gibran says, he says, in the past, Westerners ate what we cooked for them, chewing and swallowing it, transforming and absorbing the good in it into their Western being. As for present day 1920, 100 years ago. Right. As for present day Easterners, they eat what Westerners cook for them and swallow it, but it is not transformed and absorbed into their own being. Rather, it transforms them into quasi-Westerners. This condition frightens and grieves me because it shows me that the East is at times like an old man who has lost his molars, and at other times like a child who has not yet grown any at all. And I feel like we're still with this Arabic, English, East-West. How do we incorporate, and how do we benefit? What do we absorb? What nourishes us? And how do we kind of intervene in these, knowledge-producing tradition in ways that truly make Arabic voices heard and come across? So I will stop here. And
it's the most beautiful and yet most distressing quote, isn't it? and 100 years ago. I mean, the reversal. It's not really a reversal. It's fascinating. I find that when you're talking to these points so well, Tarek, thank you for these comments. One of the things that I'm reminded of is just last week, I had an interview with a scholar and a director of the tropical medicine unit of Baylor Hospital, one of the biggest hospital medical complexes in the United States, based in Texas. Peter Hotez has just released a new book about the what he calls vaccine diplomacy, and about how trying to address pandemics in the future is going to be an increasingly political issue, as we have seen so much during this pandemic. And it's a fascinating book. It was, I'm not going to tell you which press because I don't want to cast aspersions anywhere, but it was produced by one of our very fine university presses here in the United States. To Peter's distress, he discovered that they did not know how to market it, and they still don't know how to market it. And I'm intrigued with what you're saying about the marketing of this kind of material. Now, this is a book written in English, but it should be going right into Arabic, into every other language that in any way is looking at the pandemic as a research topic, of course. And I wonder if there's not a role for the Association of University Presses, which, as I understand it, extends beyond the United States and Canada to other nations. If there couldn't be some sort of associative, cooperative arrangement set up to build marketing capability and to get across to other languages and to other contexts in academic discussion, this is available. We've just had a major piece come out here, there. Why don't we get together and see if we can't get a translation moving? Is that done? Do you know if the associations of the university presses work together on this kind of thing at all?
I don't know. Maybe this is a question for Abdurraouf, who's
We
on
keep,
the
we keep
editorial
we've got a
side
lot
of
of
things.
questions for you coming up.
But but I do think, you have editors. I mean, Abdurraouf could say more about this, but I think there has to be the field is moving in different directions today.
Right.
We're no longer just kind of the classical and the modern and the medieval. You know what I mean? I mean, there are cross-disciplinary, at least in my world, there are a lot of cross-disciplinary openings and overtures that need to be reflected on the editorial side.
Mhm.
And that requires that, Abdurraouf works with someone, his colleague in I don't know, in anthropology and so on, and to think of strategies about how to, how to basically market these books, how to present them, how to frame them, and I think that's important because, we can't, sometimes you have a book that touches on an area of studies, and this is the issue with area studies as well, and how it is organized, especially in the US.
Mhm.
But how do you connect them to other conversations? And I think the editors have a great role in doing this, and that requires more work of them. I mean, so but that's just the way things are right now, and I think. But I think whatever the association of publishers is doing or can do to help this process, I think it would be very important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I hope there's something that could be done there, because it seems to me that they and their editors, as you're saying, should be the ones who are most alert to what's happening next door and what's happening across the world and what's happening in their field and in nearby fields, as we say, because as you mentioned, it's going in so many directions. Thank you again for this input. It's terrific, Tariq, and of course we'll come back as we start talking together in a bit. And now, Abdurraouf, we have everything to ask you. We have all referred and are waiting now for you to set us straight on every point.
I hope I can live up to the expectations.
now, now that we've put nothing but pressure on you. No, seriously, yeah, I know that your own input has been so valuable to me too in thinking about these issues. So take it as you'd like, but I think it's wonderful. Thank you for being with us, because hearing from the publishing house, from the editor, from the acquisitions man himself, I think is exactly what we need next. So you have the floor, sir. How about it?
Thank you very much. Yes, I work, of course, for Brill in the Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies department. And Brill already exists for 337 years. It has a very long tradition, especially in printing and publishing non-Western scripts and more complex academic work, we're very much a niche player. Our publications are all highly academic, but still in that field. Well, in the field I work in, Middle Eastern and Islamic studies, so far, Brill has a long tradition of publishing works in Arabic and Persian and Turkish and in Arabic script, but those were usually always editions of Arabic works. And we see now that in a globalizing, changing world where maybe English is very dominant still, but we also see other upcoming languages and cultures. We think we want to also present a platform for publications in other languages. So we also made the strategic decision to start publishing works fully in Arabic, also studies, not only editions. This is a decision that was made very deliberately, because this way you can really give people, native speakers of the Arabic language, a bigger voice, because they always can express themselves better in their mother tongue than in any other language, even if they spend a lot of years learning it. Most people would prefer, well, a lot of people prefer to publish in their own language because they simply can better express themselves. And that being said, and especially also for this field, it is also important to hear the voices from the people who are living in that region. They can bring in new perspectives. They may have access to different sources. So you get voices that would otherwise be unheard. We think that will severely enrich the field as well. And how can we further stimulate this? Of course, Brill is a niche player, and for a lot of people, the products Brill produces may be a little bit out of their range financially. However, there are very interesting developments in the area, in the field as well. Open access is gaining more and more importance, which means that the online versions of products will be freely accessible for all end users. And the European Union is very much investing in this. And Brill is also making strategic partnerships with other institutions in other parts of the world to finance open access publications. So this way we make our products also more accessible for everyone anywhere in the world who has an internet connection. And well, there is a point Doug raised, and I'm not sure I very much agree with him. Yeah, this is already a discussion point.
Right.
That people should just learn better English and publish their work in English. And I think that for a certain group, it might be a viable option to learn English and eventually publish in English. But if, to an extent, our publications may be also interesting for a little wider audience, an audience that would not maybe easily learn English. For example, maybe in the Arab world, for the historians may learn some European language for their research, while people in Sharia faculties often only know Arabic. So and since we publish a lot in the field of Islamic studies that could also be relevant for people in that field, it would make sense to do it in English. That's also why we had an Arabic edition, or it's an anthology from the Encyclopedia of Islam published in Arabic. It's now in press, so it will appear next month.
Great.
Which will hopefully reach a lot of people in the Arab world also, who otherwise would not be able to read these kind of articles in a European language. And it could also be great teaching material for Arabic institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Abdurraouf. Yeah. I mean, if I just interrupt you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because it's the same with other languages like German or Swedish or Dutch. If you want to reach your fellow citizens, it doesn't make much sense to do this in English. But you have to have these two audiences in mind. Your colleagues in the universities, and then the more general educated reader. And I'll finish soon, but we had Latin as a scientific language for many centuries in Central Europe, and we had Arabic in a very big area as the scientific language for many centuries. And yeah, and English will be on the demise at some point, surely. But at the moment, it's the way how to reach other people. And so it's part of basically education if you want to become a scientist, to learn how to write in English. But there's more, of course, to science than just to reach your fellow scientists. There's you want to reach a wider public, and here you're completely right. Yeah, I agree.
Especially the people for more seminar kind of institutions, you have a very hard time reaching them in English or French or whatever European language.
Yes, and you also think of school books, for example. I mean, school books are so important for the vision of our world, and I mean, academic publishers mostly today, but the influence of school books is so enormous, and that I sometimes think we should pay more attention and invest more time as academics to try to consult on writing school books, and these, of course, are the native languages, and they are a very important sector. And the combination between academic publishing and school book publishing is so important. And it's a very important area also for the Arabic voice being heard, and be connected to the general development of humanities. Yeah.
I love that point you're making, Doug, and we do have to come back to you, of course, Abdurraouf. But if we can start at the student level, when ostensibly we're working with younger minds, and begin to establish for them the concept of the world body of thought, of academic reason, and of critical thinking from the beginning, then there's not such a terrible jump in trying to lead them towards this later in their educational career. Let it go in there, let alone in their lives. I think this is a very important point. And I don't suppose much of this happens, though. There isn't that much work in terms of school books for kids, is there?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, we mostly publish postgraduate level works.
Yep.
We're highly academic, so it's not really about school books.
Yeah.
So maybe that's another one who can fill that gap.
Yeah, exactly. Fascinating topic, though. Go ahead. Sorry that we jumped in there with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think publishing in Arabic is not just simply rendering what was in English or French into Arabic. It's to conceptualize of the topic in Arabic. You know, it's not, so there is definitely the translation part is important, but if you can think of the Nahda project in the 19th century, it was about to create Arabic as a receptacle for modernity, for kind of conceptualizing of new sciences and learning and so on in Arabic. And so that's very important to keep in mind. And so it's part of a certain training that needs to start early on. You know, and to come back to your points about schools, and so it's the way you think in a language that allows you to produce knowledge in this language as well. So that's very important too.
And it was successful, right? I mean, it did create an Arabic discourse that is completely modern and up to date and engaged with the rest of the world. But it's Western blindness towards this, that's the problem. And here the publishing companies come in, of course, because there's so much intellectual gold to be found in Arabic.
Yeah.
How to receive it.
That's what we do not want to miss out on. I mean, there are gems in the Arab world being produced, like El Abhath, for example, from the American University in Beirut, which is a bilingual journal, which is now being published by Brill. By more of these kind of initiatives, we are trying to bring those who write in Arabic and those who write in English or French or whatever together, and to make them exchange ideas. And by making also more the Arab authors more known in the rest of the world, because usually what we publish finds its way to mostly Western libraries in the United States and Europe. So if we can try to push more content, Arabic language content, good content towards those libraries, then you see that there will be much more fruitful cross-fertilization, I believe.
Yeah, I think this is very laudable. I mean, I also hear that you try to have Arabic being printed with Brill. I mean, that's rare with Western companies, and it adds to the diversity of this world. I mean, it's not a one language world. I think we need both. Yeah, we need to be pragmatic about reaching people in English, but also to mirror the many thoughts that are made in the many different languages, and especially in world languages like Arabic.
And there's another point which is central here, which is promotion, training and promotion, because scholarship, at least the kind of academic scholarship that many of us are engaged in, is intimately tied to the way you are evaluated at various institutions. I mean, this is a scholarship. So the language that you're publishing in has to be legible to evaluation committees that have to make arguments for you, or that have to, you know, in some places they give you points and citation index and things like that. But basically you're part of an economy that is not just simply about the knowledge production and the book, but that is part of department formations, jobs, promotions, and the status of specific expertise within those institutions. So, and those, you know, and that's something we also need to think about. So we need to balance between, you know, between kind of expanding the publication, but also making sure we continue to be legible to these institutions, or at least do the translation work at that level, because that would also be required.
Mm-hmm. We say publish or perish. I know exactly what you're talking about. And in fact, we have a question or a comment really coming in from the audience, very much aligned with this, saying that academic publishing is usually closely related to academic promotion. And this is dictated to a large extent by the university's obsession. I'm reading our friend's words here. Ranking and visibility, which won't be achieved unless you publish in English, which is interesting. And it seems to be a vicious cycle going on here. And a nice reflection on what you're saying. Is that correct, Abdurraouf? Is it keeping things in English because the publish or perish cycle goes to English?
Well, my impression is that mostly the publications are ranked by the journal you publish in, and if the journal has a good reputation and is, for example, indexed in Scopus or one of the other major indexing services, then you get more credit for it.
Right.
And yeah, well, one of our thing, and Scopus is not only for English language journals. That's quite a misunderstanding. There are also French or multilingual journals, French and also Arabic, that are being included now in Scopus. So there is, in that sense, there is also a future for other languages than English. But it would be good to get more journals that also accept papers in Arabic in these indexing services.
Yeah, I couldn't
think,
agree more.
A field where publishers can play a big role in.
Mhm. We're being referred by another audience member to the Arabic Citation Index, relatively recently launched, I believe. Are you gentlemen aware of this one?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah, it looks like something along the lines of what you're talking about, primarily in scientific literature, which sounds good. Something to look into along exactly the lines we're at. I suppose one thing that we haven't directly taken on yet is, in a way, it's the elephant in the room, said the English speaker in the group here, right? How did English become the dominant language it is? I mean, we know from history of a time when French was the language of the Russian court. And of course, when Arabic was a mighty language in scholarly literature. What makes the lingua franca the lingua franca? And as I think it was Dog saying earlier, it will meet its demise at some point, and another language will come to the fore. How does this happen? And what occurred here? It's almost a hegemony at this point, isn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, I think, I mean, from a point of view of history and philology, if you think of the 19th century, the philologists in Berlin were so influential, like Mommsen or Wilamowitz and so on. There was kind of the big science and humanities program, and the method was so influential that German was very important, together with French.
Mm-hmm.
And in Germany, of course, we Germans exiled our best minds in the 30s, basically Albert Einstein and so on. Yeah. And we never recovered from this. So, and many went through to the States and to Britain.
Yeah.
And of course, when I studied with Dimitri Gutas, and Gutas was the successor of Rosenthal, who was a Berlin student of Wilamowitz. So it's same in history of science and so on. And the Warburg Institute, where I did my PhD, was fled Germany in 1933. So there's a historical story here behind German. And then with French, with the loss of the empire, I think, but French is still very important, of course, also in our fields. But it's, as I said, it's not, the situation of Arabic is not that different from what we have if you're German. You have German universities, you're taught in German, and then you have to publish in English to reach a wider audience. And the Dutch and the Swedish, or so on, the Norwegian are much more pragmatic. Scandinavian are very pragmatic about this. And they have English their English usually is much better than those of the Germans, because they know they have to know this language. So it's sad, but it's also good to have. I mean, it's very good to have a language that very many people know.
I suppose it is. I mean, it provides a channel through which you can be sure to reach the widest audience. But as you say, I mean, I also see the sadness, and I feel in particular, I'm not sure if it was Tarek a moment ago or Abdurraouf who was saying that you need to understand how writers think in their own languages. You need to to feel these impulses. And you really, to some degree, I mean, thank God for our great translators. There are some wonderful people working, and you can get a great deal, but not to be able to actually accept something, to receive something in its original language means you're losing something along the way.
Exactly. If you look, for example, the field of Al-Andalus studies, a lot of what's going on there is being published in Spanish, which is also a world language.
Right.
And a lot of those authors have difficulty publishing in English. So, yeah, there's a lot to be done in terms of translation, maybe, or just publish in Spanish in order to get these authors involved. You wouldn't want to miss out on the content they produce.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, you think, of course, we do a great deal of coverage with the trade. And so I'm always thinking in terms of the commercial side that we feel great pressure and interest on in that part of our coverage work. But you think, for example, of some of the great publishers in the United States, I'm now talking on the trade side, who have learned to put their books out not only in English, but immediately in Spanish as well. Because, of course, there is an enormous Spanish-speaking contingent here in the United States. And there is a great market there, to be quite frank about it. And you wonder if that kind of simultaneous presentation isn't going to make more and more sense in the future. And yet we're not quite at that point yet, I suppose, right?
Language things are very much connected to geostrategical, hegemonical power balances in the world. And yeah, maybe, yeah, things change in the world. So maybe in a few decades, we'll all have to publish and speak Mandarin in academia. So who knows?
Yeah.
I know.
Also,
we shouldn't laugh, I know. Yeah.
I think it's also so important to cultivate this, your own home language for academia, and just to feel at home. I mean, to have an academic home in your own mother or father's tongue. It's that's a very and it's transporting, of course, your thoughts to your friends, to your community, and that's very essential. And it's, of course, yeah, something the feeling at home, but also about distributing and sharing the voice of reason, basically, and of literature. And yeah, that's so that's why it's so important to cultivate basically bilinguality in academia, and to publish. I mean, all of us should basically publish in 2 languages. That would be great.
Yeah.
Because most of us are somehow have a second language that we feel at home at. Yeah.
We often publish edited volumes with contributions in English, in French, in German. So yeah, we try to do justice to the preferred language of the authors for their publications.
Another point I want to raise, I think
Yes,
also
Tarek.
integral to this, is the peer review process. Because
Right.
again, and that's also the invisible labor of publishing, because these people don't, I mean, you need this kind of academic community to assess and vet and evaluate and comment on this work. So this is something, and I turn to the editors and publishers in the room, this is something that needs to also be invested in. You should, this is a form of labor also that cannot continue to go without, I mean, that's an issue when you have an article that comes into your journal and you need to send it out for peer review. I mean, this is really, it's a struggle sometimes, because it is something that, these people do it as a service to the field, but also there has to be something done to kind of preserve, sustain, expand this process, because without it, the whole economy is kind of undermined. The whole knowledge production system is undermined, and this is done differently, from country to country, from but that needs also to be part of this conversation, because and to think about us producing knowledge as part of a community of knowledge producers, and not simply, within very, very strict silos, where things have been done and continue to be done for many, many years. So how do you connect through also these processes of evaluations?
Very interesting. I like that concept of actually producing into the knowledge community, and blurring some of the lines, if you will, between languages, between nationalities, between regions, between cultures. We have an interesting comment coming in here from Ayman Akil, who is saying, do you think the social sciences research produced by Arabic scholars and published in English language is losing quite a bit of its value for the local community? Do you think there should be a way of publishing it in the local language to make it more relevant and efficient from the communication point?
Absolutely.
It really depends on what you want to, who you want to reach with your publication. If your audience is mostly Arabic speaking, then it would be preferable to publish it in Arabic. If you would prefer to reach a wider academic audience of sociologists also working in languages not directly relevant for your geographical region, then English would definitely be preferable. So it really depends on who you want to reach, I would say.
Which is a good way of answering the value question. The value actually lies in who it is you want to reach. And yeah, exactly. That is to whom you point this. We're within our last couple of minutes. This thing has flown by. It's been such an interesting conversation. I think what I'll do is ask each of you to give us a last point, top of mind, the thing that you think is the most important thing for us to walk away from our session together with. Doug, can we start again with you? What do you want us to remember most?
Well, I think reaching out to, Western publishing companies, to the Arabic intellectual world of today must be the aim. It's a world language. So many discussions going on that are not really covered scientific discussions in our, whatever our here means, in Western publishing companies. So we need this viewpoint, these many viewpoints as part of Western academia.
Exactly. Well said. Tarek, what would you like to say to us in the final
minutes? I would just reiterate, the need for more kind of support for and funding and subventions for these presses and the kind of economies that they rely on to enable these works to be published. But also, one thing I was thinking about at the end, is the Arabic scholars. We talk about scholars of Arabic and Arabic scholars. So I just want to mention that, it's important to continue to balance between knowledge produced within, European or American context and knowledge that is relevant for the people in specific places in the Arab world or the Middle East at large or what have you. So I think it's important also to have, there's a big responsibility in publishing here. You're not just simply thinking of, promotion and reaching a wider audience, but you also want something to be relevant to the communities that are directly affected by the knowledge you are producing. So that balancing also needs to be emphasized and sustained while this whole, infrastructure is properly subsidized and properly supported.
I like this sub-theme that's developing. In a way, it's kind of the local global dynamic that we talk about at times, where you can work locally and you can work globally at the same time if you remember the balance. And it's important that you're talking about, Tarek. Very nice. Abdurraouf, our man for all questions. What is your key answer?
I think we should offer everyone who has something relevant to say a platform, all the different voices in different languages from different traditions, in order to get a more profound discussion and exchange of ideas. And that will eventually benefit scholarship on all sides.
Very well put. That's a wonderful way to end this. And I want to thank all three of you. Dr. Tarek, Abdurraouf, you've been wonderful. These have been very stimulating comments and a terrific discussion. Thank you so much for bringing all of this to the table with us. And I'd like to thank our audience. Again, I am Porter Anderson, the editor-in-chief with Publishing Perspectives. We are honored to be the media partner of Sheikh Zayed Book Award, which of course is doing a great deal of translation and helping Arabic work moving out into the world as it honors some of the best writing coming from Arabic every single year, now in its 15th year. As we were saying, if you'll read us, you'll soon be interested in it to know their shortlists coming up. We hope quite soon. We're looking forward to the information. And we hope that you'll join us next time. We will have more of these sessions. And we will alert you in the same ways we did through our social channels and through our pages and through the Sheikh Zayed Awards programming so that you can keep up with us and find us again in the future. I thank you once again, gentlemen. You've been fantastic. Thank you to our audience. We hope you have a good evening and a good day, and bye-bye for now.